Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, July 15th, 2025 regular business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with all council members present tonight. So before we move on to adoption of the agenda, I want to share a statement to acknowledge the tragic crash that happened on the evening of July 9th near 5th Avenue and Simmons Street, and it claimed the lives of two of our community members, 71-year-old Joy Izindu and 62-year-old Carla Gonzalez. On behalf of the City of Olympia, I want to extend our deepest condolences to their families, friends, and to everyone impacted by this devastating loss for our community. I also want to acknowledge the first responders, OPD's crisis response unit, along with chaplains and peer support officers who all responded to the scene to assist community members, first responders, and the families of Joy and Carla. We also appreciate the thorough work of our officers as they continue their investigation into this incident. So it is an incredibly difficult time, and it underscores the importance of community care. So let's keep Joy and Carla in our thoughts, their families in our thoughts, as we navigate this unimaginable pain together. Thank you. I also want to share that later this week, on Thursday evening, July 17th, we'll be having a special study session, and we have one item on our agenda for that study session, and it will be a briefing, a council briefing on the Workers' Bill of Rights. So we will be holding that session this coming Thursday here in the council chambers at 6 p.m. So with that, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of the agenda as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. So our first item tonight is special recognition honoring the outgoing and incoming Poet Laureate. And we have Stephanie Johnson, our Arts Program Manager, presenting this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Payne and members of council. Again, Stephanie Johnson, Parks, Arts, and Recreation. And we're here tonight to celebrate Kathleen Bird, who's been our Poet Laureate from June 2023 to July 2025, or opposite. In any case, 2023 to 2025. And during that time, well, actually, let me just back up, just for people. We had poetry here last week, but just for people who don't know, again, about the program. Every 2 years, City of Olympia selects a Poet Laureate to engage our entire community in the literary arts. Olympia's take on the position of Poet Laureate is less an honorary title and more about service over status. Duties include promoting poetry as an art form, expanding access to the literary arts, and encouraging poetry as a community voice that contributes to a sense of place. Kathleen Bird served as Olympia's second Poet Laureate to have a theme related to their tenure, and her theme was centered around the environment and climate change. And during her time as Poet Laureate, she conducted a collaborative event with paintings and poetry at the Spring 2024 Arts Walk, and another poetry reading at the Fall 2025 Arts Walk, or the Fall 2024 Arts Walk, and then again in the spring. She facilitated 7 poetry readings, many around books that were edited by state and national poet laureates, and all of them having to do with the environment in some way. She also facilitated 7 poetry writing workshops on the theme that rotated on earth, water, air, and fire. And as the role of Poet Laureate is much wider than her work for the city, they're invited to speak to organizations, schools, and agencies throughout the community. During her time as Poet Laureate, Kathleen was also a featured reader at the Olympia Poetry Network, conducted a climate writing workshop with Thurston Youth Climate Coalition, participated in the 2024 Washington Center Salon, and in a poetry reading with Cynthia Pratt at the Lacey Depot for Lacey Loves Laureates. And her crowning achievement, which will be celebrated tomorrow at Squaxin Park from 4 to 6 p.m., is a community anthology of poetry called Still the Water, and it's Olympia Poets on Place. And while Kathleen comes up, I will hand these over to Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Stephanie. And none of the work would have been possible without Stephanie. She really collaborated and made everything happen really seamlessly, supported people who came to the events, was just so great about communication. And the anthology definitely was a joint effort. And actually really a community effort, and I think that's what's so beautiful about it. In it, you'll find 52 poems written by citizens of Olympia, some of them as young as 15, and then on through our elders. And that was one of my goals coming into the role, was to bring voices of youth and elders together, particularly around climate change, where can sometimes be some division around people created the problem that we're handing down. And as an elder, and as many of us in this room have been involved in social change or environmental justice work for a long time, that handing of the torch and sharing of the voices and hopes and griefs together, I think, is really important. So I was really happy to see those voices come together in this anthology. I was really surprised myself at how much the anthology expressed this sense of place that Olympia offers and is for us. I was particularly moved that these poems aren't just about nature, but they're really entangled with nature. They express how it's part of us, how our places define us and make us, how they give us solace and also teach us. So I hope you'll all read it and maybe have a chance to come to the celebration tomorrow. I'd like to read the poem I decided to include, one of my poems. It's a shorter poem, and for me, when the world feels like too much, I often turn to the garden. And this is a pretty simple poem, but for me, it expresses a way of being with the enormity of what's going on in the world in close proximity to what's right with us. It's called A Garden's Promise. Fig leaves will open to just about anything. Relentless sun, mist, downpour. 5-pronged like our own hands, and veined too like our own. They burst from every limb, crowding one another with abandon. I can tell you they're green with golden veins, but you know that, don't you? I can tell you they begin in June and reach through July, August, and September. A refuge for birds and squirrels, not troubled by news of fires and floods. They just open and open and open. Come October, come on over. We'll eat some sweet figs together. Thank you.
Shall I finish the program and then council comments? Okay.
Sure.
So last week, this council approved the appointment of Ocean as our 5th poet laureate, and we have Ocean here today as well. So a passing of the baton, so to speak. And I just wanted to kind of bring you up to speed. Ocean's theme is resilience. And so in his application, he wrote, "Resilience, as the focus of my term, would be explored as a dynamic interplay of endurance, adaptation, and hope. I would frame resilience not as a solitary act, but as a collective process rooted in community, storytelling, and connection to place. In Olympia, where the natural world and social justice intersect, I would encourage poetry that reflects on how we persevere through climate change, social iniquities, and personal struggles. By highlighting stories of resilience, whether through surviving loss, advocating for change, or finding joy in adversity, I would inspire residents to see poetry as a means to process challenges and envision a stronger, more connected future." So here's Ocean.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you all for granting me this honor and burden of this appointment. I intend for the next 2 years to participate in bringing the powerful, sacred nature of words to our city and work with the theme of resilience. And I wanted to share a poem with y'all. 1,500 weeks, 170,000 hours of waking, 80,000 hours of sleep. This might be what I have left, if the teeth of the gods only grin. A handful of loves, a chest full of beating. All the while, steady slipping, entropy's cool waters undercut this castle of sand. What good can I bring into this world with the weeks that remain, until the mirror reflects an old man, until death's ruby lips smile just for me? But I am still a child, racing the river mouth, all glee and glimmer eye, bare feet smacking sandbar, squatting to scoop sogged muck and slap together this makeshift castle. Sweet sand, oh sweet sand, feel it laugh through my fingers.
Thank you very much. Comments from council. Councilmember Madrone.
Kathleen, thank you so much for your service and all of the gifts that you have offered to our community, including this really lovely parting gift here. I saw that Ocean has a contribution here, so it's a lovely passing off of the torch. But thank you for your service. And Ocean, it's really wonderful to see you here, and I really look forward to the gifts that you bring to the community through this role. Thank you so much for being willing to serve in this way.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Oh, what an exciting part of our agenda today. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for all of your contributions as Poet Laureate. I am always just really surprised of how different all of the poets have been for our Poet Laureate program thus far. I mean, even hearing both of your poems just now, wildly different styles. And I have so enjoyed your style. You have a way of writing about nature that just feels good to me. I loved, you know this, but I loved your poem. I think it's called I Don't Know. I love that. It's on my wall. And even this one about the garden, like sometimes there's deeper meaning to it, absolutely. And sometimes I just want something that makes me happy. And that's something that your poetry has been doing. So I so appreciate that. I do wonder where these anthologies will be for community members. And so hopefully we'll get an answer to that. I appreciate having my own, certainly. But hopefully they'll be somewhere that's easily accessible to the community, so it's not just us, but a broader audience of people that get to enjoy it. Yeah, and wow, there's you're not only highlighting some of your own talents, but also putting forward other folks. I noticed that your poem is at the end. Very humble. Ocean, thank you so much for applying, putting your hat in the ring, and then also accepting the offer to be our Poet Laureate. So I'm looking forward to what you'll bring in your different style. Something that I was really excited about in your application materials was the emphasis on schools as well, and so I'm looking forward to see how that comes to fruition. Thank you both so much.
Councilmember Gilman.
In a world of emojis, tweets, and acronyms, you've both brought us the beauty and the power and the more clear language of using full sentences. And I'm so grateful for that. So very grateful for that. Because it's neither a dying art or a lost art, but it's something that I think it's really important that we're working to center and create more resources for people to learn alongside poets like yourselves. And I especially, Kathleen, I've appreciated your voice over many years of friendship, and especially valued your exchanges with Dan Leahy and some of the poems in your book that you published last year that merge community activism and trying to make a better world with acknowledging the natural world that's all around us. And I'm just so grateful for your voice. And Ocean, thank you for the gift of the poem tonight, and looking forward to serving alongside you. So welcome.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Well, first of all, Ocean, welcome to the city of Olympia as our new poet laureate. I'm looking forward to what you'll do over the next 2 years. No pressure. Kathleen's done quite a bit. But I do appreciate your theme, resilience. I think that that couldn't be more timely given where we are. And so I'm very much looking forward to the words that you have to offer to our community in really challenging times. So thank you for stepping up, and congratulations. Kathleen, as I said to you a moment ago, I think your words are there to, they'll be there etched in the city's history to remind us of our values of climate change. Considering where we are now, I think we'll need that reminder of what our values are, and they'll be there thanks to you. Sometimes I think we think of words as just words, but words that are written, words that are thought about carefully, words that are spoken, that's an action. Those are actions. And your job is to remind us of our better angels, as they say, and I think you've done that quite well over these last 2 years. So thank you. And I have 2 items here that we're going to present to you tonight. This first one is this beautiful vase here, and it says, City of Olympia Poet Laureate Kathleen Bird, for using the power of poetry to contribute to thoughtful response and centering around our environment and climate change. July 2023 to June 2025, presented by the Olympia City Council. And I also have for you a mayor's coin in recognition of your service to us, so congratulations. So if you want, please come up with those who are here as well to celebrate you. And that includes our new poet laureate for a photo.
Derailing, derailing.
Thank you.
Can we get our chair also back?
Yes. Hey, if you want to get in here in this, come on up.
She's writing her poem for you.
Thank you.
Thank you both again so much, and congratulations to your family and friends, and to us as a city. All right, so we are going to move on to public comment, and it looks like we have 2 people signed up remotely tonight, and looks like they haven't spoken in the last 30 days, so I'm just going to remind our commenters that you have 2 minutes for your comments. There will be a clock that will appear on the screen. You'll hear the ding of a bell at about 30 seconds in, and that's to remind you, or excuse me, 30 seconds remaining, and that reminds you that you have about 30 seconds left in your comments. Just a reminder to send your emails to us, or excuse me, send your comments to us via email if you do not finish them in the 2 minutes allotted. And as a reminder that we are in an election season, so please refrain from referring to or supporting or opposing a candidate or ballot measure in your comments tonight. So we are going to begin with Chuck Boland. Chuck, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, certainly.
We can hear you. We can't see you, and that's okay.
Oh, well, I'm not, maybe I shouldn't be seen. Is there something I should do something real quickly here? The audio's on, but I don't see the video. Well, okay. Well, I know you've heard this issue before, but as a homeowner in the Capital neighborhood, I am perplexed. I own a home at 1519 Columbia. This is what it looks like just in my immediate area. Now something's popping around. Stay as an attendee, promote you to host would like. I don't get it. This is what it looks like just in my immediate area. 1604 Water Street, just behind me. This family home was purchased 3 years ago and is now renting out offices and desk space. 1510 Water Street. This family home was just purchased. The new owner has announced he's converting it to offices. There were 2 offers on this home from families, but the buyer offered a bid higher by 6 figures, putting the property out of reach for family and beyond home loan limits and increasing the shortage of Olympia family housing. 1509 Columbia. This is an office building as well, with desk space rented out and the scene of many meetings, and I must say a neighborhood blight. 1527 Columbia is now being remodeled. The absentee owner is not forthcoming, but it certainly appears this will be offices. And 205 15th Avenue, recently purchased, was publicly advertised as an office facility. No attempt to hide the fact the backyard is a parking lot and there are several cars there when the legislature's in session. To conclude, lobbyist is not the issue. Our neighborhood is zoned residential. And why is this ignored? Columbia Street has a speed limit and it's enforced. Columbia Street has parking restrictions. They're certainly enforced. Why not the zoning laws? Please tell me. Why? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Up next, we have Sharon Case.
Ms. Case is traveling.
Is our commenter still traveling over?
I think so.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Did you call on Sharon Case?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you, because my screen was frozen.
Oh, no
So,
worries.
okay, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. This is an issue that I think really, really needs your attention. I also reside in one of 2 square blocks abutting the Capitol campus. Included are 18 to 19 lobbyist-owned houses that remain unoccupied for more than 3/4 of the year. To provide you some perspective, I'm a former City of Olympia lobbyist who maybe 20 years ago became embroiled in this perennial issue. Much has worsened since then. What started as a handful of houses, which I characterized then as primarily places to sleep and cook, with space for a home office, uh, needed a home occupation permit by a permanent resident. Fast forward to today. Neighborhood pressures have mounted. Interim vacancies are a glaring threat to the character and vitality of our beloved historic neighborhood. The culture has become more callous, and the city and legislative delegation have remained unresponsive to our pleas. Here are just a few examples to help bring this to life. Across the alley, a lovely historic family home was sold to what I believe is a law firm in Tacoma, but records indicate one of its employee lobbyists is the legal owner. Upon introducing himself, her husband explained to me that their plan was to raise their young son in our neighborhood, but the move in date was unclear. That was 2 years ago. Instead, during session, it's inhabited by a handful of people who leave every night to return to their homes and whose clients stream in and out of the front entrance during office hours. The house is vacant for the remaining 8 to 9 months. The misuse of this house is flagrant. Another on the corner, a block away, is similarly used. The latest buyer of the house next door indicated to the realtor that he always wanted to live in the neighborhood. Now we learn he'll not be a permanent resident, but will use it only during session, having bumped up the purchase price beyond the reach of interested families, and will likely rent space to others. At the outset, the original handful of lobbyists were, for the most part, sensitive to neighborhood concerns. Now, 8 cars can be sighted parked by clients in a curved drive in the middle of the afternoon, and other houses vacated in the off season. And
Ms. Case, thank you very much. I believe your time is expired. I can't see the timer. So thank you very much for your comments. That concludes public comment for tonight. Are there any comments from the dais? Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, I'm becoming more and more aware of this issue. I've spoken to a few people in the neighborhood about the vacancy and office usage, and I'm the echo. Okay. So I'll be honest. There's a couple of things I've thought about around this. So I mean, some cities have considered doing vacancy tax. Some of them have tried to do an adjustment on property taxes, where if you own 2 or 3 more homes, or you don't live in the city limits. I think about the cap we have on our short-term rentals in the city that was put in maybe a decade ago, and so I'd be very curious about ideas that we can be looking at as a city around this issue without having to stop legitimate businesses from operating, but the vacancy spaces.
Thank you. Additional comments, Councilmember Gilman.
So I didn't hear real well. Was it Chuck Bolin who spoke first? So Mr. Bolin's thought that it's an issue of use rather than focusing on the fact that they're lobbyist or Boeing or Microsoft owned houses. focusing on the use and the impacts in the neighborhood, I think might be a more useful lens. We last made a run at this around 2018. Austin Jenkins, who'd been a longtime reporter here, did a whole set of writings and a big diorama showing each of the homes, who owned them, who they lobbied for, and then drawing strings to the Capitol with major initiatives that had been lobbied from those houses. And he called it the South Capitol Lobbywood rather than neighborhood. So I mean, it's a long-standing issue, and I understand the proximity to the Capitol, but I hope that we could approach it again considering Mr. Boland's suggestions that it's about use and it's about traffic impacts rather than it's about who owns the buildings. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. And yeah, I actually agree with that. And as we're talking about what neighborhood commercial means in our comprehensive plan update, I think it might be timely to see if Susan and her team could send us maybe just a memo about what the current law and standards are around home-based businesses and any kind of residential occupancy. Is that something that a nod could do, or without having to have her come to the camera? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right. So we will move on to adoption of the consent calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the consent calendar as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent calendar is adopted. So that takes us to our first business item on our agenda tonight, item 6A, which is the approval of the recommended 2025 traffic box wrap designs. And we have coming back Stephanie Johnson, our Arts Commission staff liaison, along with Kathy Dorgan, the chair of the Arts Commission, presenting tonight.
Hello, Mayor Payne and members of council. We are here this evening with the recommendation for 10 new traffic box wrap designs. Again, I'm Stephanie Johnson, Parks, Arts, and Recreation, and with me is Kathy Dorgan, who's chair of the Arts Commission. So we had a terrific turnout this year. I guess Carrie's turning it on. We had a terrific turnout this year. We received 90 applications with really great designs from applicants who resided within 30 miles of Olympia. Voting was held the month of May, and 1,439 respondents on Engage Olympia had 3 votes each, and the top 10 were reviewed by the Arts Commission on June 12th, and Chair Dorgan is here to present them to you. If approved, these will be installed in late summer after we get all the artists under contract, and the temperature is hovering between 50 and 80 degrees, which is the best temperature for wrapping things.
I am pleased, is that right? I am pleased to present the top 10 designs.
Oh, sorry.
That is not one. Go ahead. Oh, there it is. Okay. A Song of the Sound by Aaron Zonka. This is an Olympia, Washington digital illustration. Herons by Moonlight by Doyle Fanning, Olympia, Washington, a digital photo collage. Four Seasons Foraged by Grace Duda, Rainier, Washington, a foraged collage. Saltwater Sanctuary by Alora Blessing, Tacoma, Washington, a digital illustration. Bud Inlet by Julie Clue, Olympia, Washington, oil on canvas. Koi Carp by Chio Sanada, Lacey, Washington, Sumi painting. We Are Olympia by Liv Lane, Olympia, Washington, a digital illustration. Cloudy Wolves and Opal Moon by Mela Cervania, Tacoma, Washington, a digital illustration. The Great Indoors by Carl Melford, Olympia, Washington, a digital illustration. River Jewels by Dominique Hart of Tacoma, Washington. This is pen on paper with hand-drawn digital background. The motion before you is to approve the publicly selected designs for Olympia traffic boxes for fabrication and installation.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the council? I will just say it's a great selection of artists and pieces. I'm looking forward to seeing them. I particularly love the Bud Inlet one, and I love the We Are Olympia, because it certainly, I think, is representative of who we are. If I had to show an image of who we are to people outside, that's the one I would choose. Mayor Pro Tem, I believe you have the motion.
Yeah. Just quickly before that is, wow, what an impressive collection. And I certainly have my favorites as well. I also, commenting on the oohs and ahs that we heard, I wonder if you all ever do like stickers or stationery or something else with the art.
I believe there have been cards. I see a lot of heads. So if that's something that council's interested in, we can certainly talk with communications about putting another set together. Okay, all right. Great.
Yeah.
So noted.
Okay. And open to other ideas. I feel like there could be some budget-friendly ways to get this art in more hands. Because it sounds like we love public art, and sometimes we see something and we want it, you know? And so how do we scratch that itch? All right, with that, we do have a motion, and I'm so glad to make it. I move to approve the top 10 designs for the 2025 Traffic Box Wrap Public Art Project as recommended by the Arts Commission and determined by public vote.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen had a question from the earlier item. Do you want me to answer that now? The one about the anthologies?
Oh, how astute of you, yes.
Okay. Well, we have 100 anthologies total. We have 52 poets. We have 7 members of council. So we're dwindling our stock pretty rapidly. So once we give the books to the poets, we're going to try to find some way, like, you know, a raffle or something to do the rest of them. And we'll also make some of the books available to the Timberland Regional Library System. And then I think Evergreen also has a zine collection as well, which I think this would qualify under. So well, in those ways. But yeah, we only have 100, so hopefully there's not a rush on the books.
Lovely. I appreciate you following up.
Sure. Councilmember Cooper, looks like you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, sorry, this is a little bit late, but I just love the idea of how to get your hands on this. And there's a couple every year that I wish I could buy really nice matted prints of. And so like maybe like a annual opportunity to buy, you know, one size print or something like that that is, you know, curated with the artists or something.
Sure. I would need to, so contractually, we have the right of reproduction, but not for a profit or a gain, but to promote the project as a whole. Council has the greeting cards because you are doing the business of the city and getting the word out there. So I would have to go back to the drawing board and kind of figure it out, reach out to artists to see if they would be willing for something like that. And I understand that that's your intent.
And doing it at cost would not be a profit. Just
Oh, you're thinking ahead. All right, you caught me flat-footed, so I'll cogitate on it. Okay, thank you. But I mean, what a great honor. Thank you so much for your interest. That is so great that you want more and not less, so I appreciate that.
All right. So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is 6B. the state legislative update. And we have Susan Grissom, our legislative liaison, to kick us off and introduce Nick Federici, our contract lobbyist.
Good evening, council members. For the record, Susan Grisham. I'm here as your legislative liaison. I don't have too much of a speaking role this evening, but our state lobbyist, Nick Federici, is here, and I'm here to introduce him. And also, as you all ask questions and have discussion, I will be making notes to inform next year's legislative agenda, so making sure I'm paying attention here to hear your hopes and dreams for next session as you talk through this past session. And with that, I will invite Nick to come to the podium.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Nick Federici, as Susan indicated, I'm your Olympia-based contract lobbyist. I do not own a home in the South Capitol neighborhood, so happy to answer questions about that should you like. But also, they say that you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. I don't know that I will be either as articulated as any of your previous poetry speakers have been. This was a rough legislative session, as you guys may have heard. A lot of things in flux, many changes. Close to a third of the legislature turning over in the elections of 2024. Brand new governor for the first time in 12 years, and a much different approach to governing, and new people in new places. Also, the largest deficit in the state's history, even larger than that during the Great Recession for a number of reasons. The final budget, as it was passed by the legislature, over 4 years. Washington is the only state in the country that budgets over a 4-year cycle. As a result, we have to plan both revenues and expenditures over that period, and that causes some interesting math problems for the state, forecasting out, that far, both in terms of caseloads and expenditures, as well as what the economy is going to look like 4 years from now. The state's final budget, operating budget, $77.8 billion. There was a $15 billion hole in that that they had to figure out how to fill. Of that, about $6 billion were done in cuts from previous staffing or programs, and about $9 billion in new revenue options. So some of the upcoming dates that are important that we need to think about. This last session began January 13th, ended on April 27th. In June 25th, we had a June economic and revenue forecast. Those are usually just sort of pit stops that we don't talk a lot about, except in this economic circumstance. Out of that $77.8 billion, the state left about $2 billion in reserves. The June revenue forecast ate up about $720 million of that reserve, with higher expectations for expenditures and lower expectations in terms of revenues for all the reasons. Washington is the nation's second most trade-dependent state. Tariffs and federal layoffs and other federal policy choices have had some pretty significant impacts on Washington's economy, and as a result, that's started to fade. As Ms. Grisham indicated, state agency budget proposals are underway right now, and so to the extent that the city would like to have either operating or capital or transportation budget projects, Governor Ferguson is now working on his first complete budget for the supplemental 26-27 fiscal year, and so that's something that we need to be thinking about. What are projects that didn't get funded or were underfunded this year or are new on the agenda that you may want to go to the legislature to talk about? Upcoming in September and November, more revenue forecasts. Each of those comes with it collective inhalation from everyone as we see how bad that's going to be and whether or not it will require a special session, to be perfectly honest. And whether or not that line that was down on a quarterly basis, $720 million, how does that fluctuate given the fluctuations of the global economy? By mid-December, the governor's budget will be released, and we'll see what he has to say in his first rollout, January 12th, next legislative session, just 60 days, so ending on March 13th, 2026. So very compressed timeline, and to be honest, I think fiscally and politically will be worse than this year. I heard many of my colleagues say it was their worst, the worst session they'd seen in their time. This was my 32nd session. Different things make things worse in different ways. There were a lot of programs that I've worked hard on, that lots of other people have worked hard on for decades, that saw reductions, right? The federal actions certainly will have impacts on the state's budget, perhaps not immediately, though some of the other executive actions are certainly going to have impact on state programs or on federal, state, and federal state shared programs. But the fiscal impacts of most of that, particularly for SNAP and Medicaid, don't hit until 2027 at the beginning of the year, which will hit the tail end of this upcoming biennium, which means some of that will have to be reckoned with. And again, because Washington does a 4-year cycle, the last 2.5 years will have to be reckoned with in this upcoming budget. Again, I think as a result of budget instability, economic instability, and those federal cuts, it's going to be a very draconian year, I would say, in terms of trying to maintain what we have right now, much less try to get additional new programs. That's not a reason not to be positive and hopeful, but it's a reason to be aware, I guess. So. One of the major items that was on your agenda, I've taken all these slides. You may remember I was here in sort of mid-session in March to address you about sort of an update there. All the slides here, the support items come from the agenda that you guys passed last year. So I'm just taking that verbatim from there. And then, as you've seen our reports as the year went on, sort of the various checkpoints along the way. The ones I've highlighted for this are the ones that sort of rose to the top, in either in terms of importance that you articulated and Ms. Grisham and Mr. Burney articulated to me over the course of session, as well as those that were able to cross the finish line, even if they weren't ideal from the perspective that you all had. So this is often referred to as the EPR bill or the producer responsibility bill in terms of extended producer responsibility for recycled products. This is something that's been on your agenda and on the legislature's agenda for a number of years. This finally made it past the finish line, and something that I helped work in as part of the broader coalition of both environmental and municipal organizations to get it done. Huge major milestone, checked off the list. Still things that weren't attained in the legislation, still things left on the table. There's separate legislation that deals with beverage containers, a bottle bill, if you will, similar to some of the things in Oregon that weren't addressed in this particular matter that may come back up next year. But just so you know, this was one of the things that you put on your agenda that was an outstanding success this year. As you can see by the margins of victory for them not going away by any means, bipartisan no votes, but something that did pass as a success this legislature. I'm happy to stop in it. Mr. Mayor, how would you like me to handle any questions? You want me to go one by one or wait till the end?
Preferably wait to the end if that's good with the rest of council.
Awesome.
Okay.
This is one that I was painfully, extraordinarily involved in, both on your behalf and for other organizations. This is 1217, also known as rent stabilization, something that you, along with many other municipalities, supported, and many consumer-focused and tenant-based organizations. Went through lots of twists and turns. As you can see by I tried to, without belaboring too many things, put the sort of blow by blow in terms of just how many iterations went through this, including some high drama that I'm happy to talk about, should you so desire. on that. Bottom line, Washington now has one of the nation's most protective statutes in the country for mobile home park residents, a limitation of no more than 5% rent increases over a year-to-year basis, and no rent increases allowed in the first year of a tenancy. For residential apartment dwellers and single-family home dwellers, 7% plus inflation, which right now is, but no higher than 10%, which in the current economic situation means 10%. So originally the bill was written as 5 and 5, but as negotiations went on and as votes had to be brought on board, that increased to 7% plus inflation. So not at all, not everything that advocates wanted to see happen, but certainly a step forward from infinite inflation allowed under previous law. This was one that had an emergency clause on it, so upon being signed by the governor, it went into effect. Gun violence. Not a lot was done this year on gun violence. This was one that you had highlighted specifically around public places. Last year, I believe, the legislature limited firearms in public places. This would have taken a step farther and been more restrictive around more locations, but did not, pass the Senate by a nearly partisan vote, but didn't make it through the House. So that's something that'll be coming back again, as well as other items in terms of gun safety and preventing gun violence. Your budget requests. So this obviously was a big one, and one that we haven't yet fully resolved yet. The legislature did decrease the amount of right-of-way funding that had been done. This was a major initiative of Governor Inslee that was specifically around right-of-ways in state DOT rights-of-way. This was expanded to apply to more rights-of-way, but the funding cut by more than a third. It was our understanding during the legislature, and I was told directly, that this would not cut funding for anyone that had previously received funding, and that was one of the things that we had set out to do, is make sure first do no harm, right? When you're making reductions, first do no harm. I wish the legislature always followed the Hippocratic Oath. Unfortunately, there has been some variance from that by the Department of Commerce. We're still $100,000 short of where we need to be. I know some of you and myself have had a number of conversations with local delegation that's chatting with Commerce to try to make sure that perhaps we can get that additional funding that has not been provided in the implementation of this legislation. Permanent supportive housing was another item that you specifically called out to make sure that we maintain the funding for that. That was accomplished. That was something that was maintained at the existing level through a number of different forms. Surprisingly, other than the right-of-way funding, housing and homelessness was one of the few places that I would, both because of the tenant protections as well as the funding that went into to housing and homelessness, is one of the places I would say is a qualified win this year from a lot of perspectives, because of, in some cases, increases to funding, in other cases, positive policy change, in other cases, as in here, do no harm, and maintaining even as need increases, obviously. Reparations study. I defer to the mayor, who's a much deeper expert on this than I am. I work closely with Representative Chapalo Street from Seattle, who was, I believe the proper word, indefatigable, is that the right word? I have reader's disease, I never know, I read words and never use them, and then I why did I say that? Was resolute and just really, really stubborn in all the best ways around this. $1 million was asked for a task force to publicly go through the process of addressing the needs of affected communities vis-a-vis reparations. A bill was not introduced for strategic reasons because people felt it would bring a lot of people out to public hearings with, frankly, demeaning testimony towards the subject. So instead, felt it was most appropriate to do through a budget proviso. There was nothing in either the original House or Senate proposal. But again, Representative Street and many, many others worked very closely with the state's BIPOC community and many activists to make sure that even though a public task force with appointed members wasn't done, $300,000 was appropriated for folks with very, very specific skill set to delve into the history in Washington State of affected communities whose ancestors were enslaved persons and do a reckoning around that. And so so there's an initial study due at the end of the year, sort of, how's it going, with a final report due to the legislature and the public at the end of 2027. This one of our biggest priorities and one of the most problematic processes that we had this year. Department of Enterprise Services asked for, and Governor Inslee asked for, about $26 million, $25.5 in Governor Inslee's original budget to carry forth the vision that had been articulated by the City of Olympia, Department of Enterprise Services, and others around that. It faced some key opposition from legislators. In the legislature, you need 60% vote in order to get capital or transportation bonds authorized. There are some legislators that are resolutely opposed, who sit in key positions, resolutely opposed to the vision that's been articulated in the Deschutes Restoration Project. As a result, this was extremely difficult to move forward. In the past, that problem was sidestepped by also supplementing with funds from the operating budget that do not require a 60% majority because they're out of direct revenues rather than bonds. Because of the scarcity of funds in the operating budget, that particular tactic wasn't possible this year, and so we had to go through the capital budget process to do that. As a result, folks who did not like this project and felt that, in fact, the estuary should be returned to or should be maintained as, in perpetuity, as a lake, and in fact, that effort should be put in place to keep it lake permanently, had a very strong hand to play in that regard just because of counting the votes. As a result, as you can see, the Senate budget only had $1.2 million in it, and that was entirely for lakeification, whatever the right, rehabilitation and recovery, sorry. Due to negotiations between the House and the Senate, we were able to get that figure back up to $14.75 million. However, there were 3 provisions in there that were tied towards the lake effort as opposed to the estuary effort, if I'm making sense, and those were vetoed by the governor. There was a belief among some that vetoing that language would still appropriate those funds. The legislature believed that if the governor vetoed those funds, vetoed those provisions, I know you guys do budgets, $14.75 million was in a specific line item. Underneath that line item were these $6.75 million in additional dollars that said, here's how specific things need to be done. And I think in my end of session report, I laid that out in great detail. And the assumption, therefore, by the legislature was if the governor chose to veto those separate sections, which he's allowed to do, that funding would remain intact from that $14.75 million, but the guidance to do the lakeification would go away. The governor's office felt differently. And the governor's office felt that when they vetoed that language, it also took away the funding as a result. In addition, there's been some dislocation in the oversight of this, both in the transition from the Inslee to the Ferguson administration, but also because the legislature did not feel the Department of Enterprise Services was moving forward in the way that they wanted, so they changed it to the Department of Ecology. And at the same time, the person that had been responsible for so much of this work at the Department of Enterprise Services left for another position out of state. That left us without a lot of leadership on this item, except for, I mean, particularly, God bless Representative Parsley, who did an exceptional job shepherding a lot of this work, along with the rest of the delegation. And so that's why we ended up with, sorry for the circuitous and somewhat tortured narrative, but that's how we went from $25.5 million down to, in the end, $8 million. I think that there are opportunities to continue those conversations. I think there are opportunities to see whether or not we can climb that number back up again, particularly given the time horizon that we have over this project, but we have an uphill climb. So, sorry, I just know this is something that's a particular interest to many of you and to the community, and it was something that was a particularly torturous legislative process. Joint Animal Services request, you'll never guess which representative went to bat on this, but they were able to secure half of what was initially needed, and Representative Parsley feels that that's going to be a positive step in the right direction. Housing resources, again, this is the state's housing trust fund. Record levels, continue to be record levels, not keeping up with the level of demand or need, or affordability, inflation, but both Governor Inslee and new Governor Ferguson put forward record levels of funding, and the legislature did better than they did in terms of final approval there. So lots of good projects around the state, as well as more competitive funds than have ever been available before for local organizations, municipalities, and others to apply to for projects that are in the pipeline. It's something that the City of Olympia has done very successfully in the past. Revenue, wow. Revenue is always difficult, right? Even more so when you are looking at a $15 billion deficit and need to be thoughtful about the ways that you're going to do that without hurting an already cranky economy. I focused here, I'm happy to talk about state revenue things that they did. I'm focused just on local revenue. These are two bills that were not successful, but they were the two bills that tried to get rid of the 3% property tax cap and lower it to 1%, which, I'm sorry, 1% to 3%, my apologies, specifically for specific purposes for local governments. We thought this was something that was likely to happen, at least for local governments. There was a proposal that you can see here from Senator Peterson, who's the Senate Majority Leader, that did it, that went from 1 to 3 for both the state portion of property tax as well as the local portion of property tax. In the end, Governor Ferguson indicated that wasn't something that he was willing to look at, either on the state or local level. Had conversations with his office and with folks at the Association of Washington Cities around now what. I'm working with the folks at AWC to try to figure out, if not this, then what? What are the options, given that the legislature gave themselves many new options for raising revenue to meet the expanding needs of the state? What are they likely to do, or what might they be open to do for the purposes of local governments that face many, if not more, of the same types of pressures on services and costs? Housing resources, one piece of good news here. This is, folks may be familiar with the document recording fee, which, because I'm old, I've been working on since I ran the first bill on it in 2001. And every iteration since then, it's now up to $183. But banks who sell their loans to other banks, like brought down the economy in 2008, don't pay that fee. And that was a legislative compromise that I was there for. And so in order to keep the banks from opposing it, we exempted them for the ensuing 24 years. This year, we finally closed that loophole. Now when banks sell mortgages to other banks, they will have to pay that document recording fee. About 30% of that comes to counties, which then gets distributed through interlocal agreements to cities. So that should be a net, at least a little bit of a positive. We don't know how much, to be perfectly honest, because banks have been banks have a separate proprietary system in which they have been tracking called MERS that tracks their business-to-business transactions. As a result, nobody knows how many transactions there's been or how much revenue that could raise. It could be a nothing burger. It could be a bonanza. So we're waiting to see as this law goes into effect later this month how that happens. So it's going to be interesting and hopefully positive, particularly for a little bit of additional local government revenue, specifically for affordable housing and homelessness. I put these here. These are two that were unsuccessful, but I think will be back this year. Matter of fact, I had lunch today with a colleague talking about these. Local REIT, real estate excise tax, giving local jurisdictions the option, giving the state the ability to, or the state doing a higher rate on above $5 million, or for example, for houses, and giving local jurisdictions the ability. Right now, you're only allowed to apply a flat rate, giving you the option on a local basis to decide if that's something you want to tier and do in a more progressive way, as well as potentially doing an additional tier specifically for affordable housing and homelessness. That was what was in House Bill 2027. The other one by, pardon me if I keep name checking Representative Partially so much, she was very active in her freshman year. She and Senator Liz Loveland had a tax essentially on short-term rentals. Expedia, which owns VRBO, which is one of the biggies, ended up supporting the bill. Airbnb, like you, I got lots of texts from Airbnb saying, don't tax fun. And so that was ultimately successful, and that bill did not pass. I think that will come back again. Again, the way that there's been different variations at different times about whether it's something that should be done, given to local authority. Is it something that should be done at the state level? It's something that should be done at the state level and distributed to locals. I think that'll come back again this year, and I had a conversation with Representative Partially about it last week. I'm sorry that Jay Burney isn't here. He understands the ins and outs of this a lot better than I do. There may be others on staff who can answer the more in-depth questions. Long story short, House Bill 2015 both creates funding as requested by Governor Ferguson, $100 million for grants to local jurisdictions for 3 years to hire new law enforcement, and the authority to impose a new local revenue option that would allow you not just to do law enforcement per se, but diversion programs, street outreach programs, the full panoply of items that help bend that curve in terms of criminal justice and other needs through a new account. So that's something that's was hard fought and much negotiated, and something that Association of Washington Cities took a major leadership role on, and that we obviously prioritize so that you could have additional resources to do those things, particularly given the importance of some of your alternative programs. Now I'll take a breath. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Nick. Any comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you. That was quite a rundown, and it's good to stop and recognize that we did have some victories, and you held on tight to some funding that's really important to us. I'm glad for that. I'm wondering if you think there's any opportunity, as Susan's taking notes about the next agenda, as more responsibility and functions devolve to local government and there's less resources rolling down to Washington State, levy lid lift and progressive taxation, for some reason, they're these super good ideas that don't pass the legislature. Does this change in the federal climate make it more or less of a conversation in the coming sessions?
I think it makes the state legislature more empathetic to the problems that you have, that they're facing some of that same, right? It's a federalized system, right? And stuff rolls downhill, and it has done that way to local governments from state unfunded mandates, et cetera, for millennia, probably. Now that states are sort of getting instead of the money flowing in from the feds, that being changed as a more federalized states' rights, whatever you want to call it, system occurs, I think there's more awareness on the part of state lawmakers, particularly those that have come from local government, right? We have a slew of new legislators, including Representative Parsley, who are fresh out of local government, a number of folks who got appointed at the beginning of this year and are now running for re-election this year, are very strong in saying this is something we need to help our local jurisdictions with. The problem has been, I almost put this on one of the slides, there was a bill that AWC Association of Washington Cities brought forward around taxing storage units for local jurisdiction, local option tax for local jurisdictions to tax storage units to fund affordable housing per se. Taxing empty space or state space filled with stuff, if you will, for people and taxing that to fund stuff, places for people to live. And the legislature said, that's a great idea. We're not going to give it to you, though. We're going to keep it. That's also what happened on the progressive REIT 3 or 5 years ago when we brought that forward. Same type of thing for affordable housing from both AWC as well as the affordable housing community. Legislature, again, said, great idea, but we have a budget we need to balance. That is going to continue to be the dilemma for the legislature about if there are good revenue ideas, who benefits from that? But I do think that awareness of how things are rolling downhill, and that in some ways you have a common enemy in the federal government withdrawing its obligations and responsibilities from supporting local governments as well as state governments, that may change some of that perspective.
Thank you, Nick. That sounds like a cautious, they might be a little bit more empathetic.
Yeah, I'm always hopeful.
Councilmember Madrone.
Speaking of things rolling downhill, disappointing to see a decrease in the right-of-way funding. I think now called the Encampment Resolution Program. Yeah. We're in conversation with Commerce to try to figure out how to get our one of our projects fully funded, the Quinn Street Village. Yep. Local governments are in this position of, the state said, here's some money to get the folks without housing off state lands, bring them into your jurisdiction, and then, you better hope we continue to fund it. And now we're in a tricky spot with that. We also, I just wanted to, I've raised this before, in the Regional Housing Council. We've discussed there's also $500,000 short for Unity Commons. So there are some ongoing needs that we have around services that we're going to need to figure that out. So I imagine that'll be part of our legislative agenda for next year. I'm also, I'm curious on how the estuary conversation evolves. $8 million was great to keep things moving forward, but there's a lot more that's needed there. It was very strange to watch all of that come about. But one thing that I've noticed in some of the conversations around it is that, it's a huge project. It's got a big price tag. I'm sure there's nervousness from the state for being on the hook for it, watching how things are going on in the federal space and knowing that those resources are potentially not available for the next 4 years at least. And so there's talk about, well, how can the project be decreased in scope and size so that it's a little less intimidating to fund? And I think one thing that we need to, be aware of and keep advocating for what we need in Olympia is that, there's probably parts of the big grandiose vision for that project that's like, okay, maybe, I know there was like artwork that was included and and some community benefits that, can come over time in different ways so that we can get the restoration done. One thing that is really important for our community, though, is that we need a bridge to be a part of that restoration project. The state, paid for the bridge that is there now, the dam. We created a transportation system around that, and so that we need to advocate that remain part of the project. So I just wanted to highlight that. And another issue that kind of bubbled up during session and seemed super popular, but then didn't get I think it didn't get a vote on the House floor, was requiring small commercial in neighborhoods. That was a bill that, I think it's popped up a couple of times now, similar to, requiring middle housing across cities, requiring that certain types of commercial businesses be allowed to operate in neighborhoods. And that's a conversation that's been popping up here on the council as we update our comprehensive plan. I know that there's interest, particularly from folks in the Land Use Committee, to see Olympia move forward on that. And so, I'm just noting that. I imagine it'll come up because I think it unanimously was voted out of committee and then just died on the floor. So I imagine that's one that we'll want to add to our list of things to track for next year. All of that said, it's so nice to be able to cross rent stabilization off of our list. That's been on our legislative agenda longer than I've been on council, and I know that there was some changes to it throughout the process, but I was actually pretty pleased with where it landed. It's very similar to what happened in Oregon. So, I think it provides, some relief to folks, and just wanted to say that, even though it was a tough session, and I agree with you, I think next year's going to be even worse. But there were some good things that came out of it that Olympia's been fighting for a long time. So, yeah, that's it. No questions, just some things.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Yeah, thank you, Nick. This is a great presentation. It's nice to get like a little more of the behind the scenes when you're not running between legislative offices. So a couple of thoughts, and I'll play off Councilmember Madrone first, and just the rent stabilization. What a huge accomplishment. Like, it's not quite what we were hoping for, but it's significant. And I think the thing to carry forward as somebody that's been doing this kind of work, like around the recording fees, like you talked about, we just need to remind people that the model rent stabilization ordinance lives in Olympia, and that should be the model for the state. So hopefully that will be how we continue the conversation with the legislature. And then the estuary. So in just watching the veto and the conversations, I think the thing that was missing for me is the urgency for the state now that, so everyone up here knows this, and you know this, but people watching TV might not know that we negotiated a 30-year agreement with the state of Washington to take care of the estuary to be. In that agreement, it very clearly lays out that, well, in that agreement and the work that was done around the design so far, it really very clearly lays out the state's violations of the Clean Water Act. And how a legislative body could put $1.6 million in the budget to keep violating the Clean Water Act just blows my mind. And so I hope that our community and advocates will pick up the mantle to help with this conversation. I know I'll be there next year as a citizen Jim, as Anna Schlecht would say, and just to keep fighting for that. Like we've got to show them that they're gonna replace that. They're going to fix that estuary one way or another. And then lastly, I think as just the conversation keeps going around local revenue, the thing that slipped through in this legislative session that still sort of bewilders me is like how many places we've created new funds for public safety sort of on the policing side of the house. I don't have a single way to fund fire and EMS as a city without creating a new taxing district or going after a higher levy lid lift, which would then jeopardize junior taxing districts in my own community. And my own ability, or our own ability as a city to look at using levy lid lift to accommodate holes in our budget that are naturally occurring because of the 1%. And so if there's another opportunity to talk about revenue for local government, let's please lift up the need to fund our fire department. I can't think of a thing that people would support more. I don't even think it needs to be councilmatic. We just need a mechanism that's not the convoluted fire benefit charge brought to us, as Councilmember Gilman said, by the insurance industry. So we're looking for more help from you. That's what I have to say. Thank you. Great year.
Thank you, Councilmember.
It's a really great point. Susan, I hope you captured that. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you, Nick. I'm sorry it was a tough 30-second session for you. Just a few things that come to mind for me, you know, as we talk about the upcoming session. Although we were successful in getting $1 million for the Joint Animal Services facility, there was a bill related to the Animal Services District that did not make it through. Essentially, that was a bill that would have allowed local jurisdictions to decide whether or not to create one, which would provide revenue for an example like we need, like a new facility. And we need that to keep going because we still have to explore ways to generate revenue for that facility. Couple things Councilmember Madrone already covered, which are the right-of-way funding. That needs to be continuous and ongoing. My criticism of the state is, when it comes to the issue of homelessness, is I personally feel like the state was too late in addressing the issue. It was left to local jurisdictions for a really long time, and you could see the writing on the wall that the state should have taken a much more significant role much sooner than it did. But anyway, we're here now, and I think the conversation around housing, while it's certainly important, of equal importance is the need to continuously talk about the rights-of-way funding and center the issue of homelessness in this conversation. It's not just about building more single-family homes or you know, duplexes and triplexes and things of that nature, but it's also about permanent supportive housing. It's also about temporary shelter. And we need, you know, we've gotten pretty good at this as a city, but we need that support in order to continue making progress that we've made. I'll be honest, I can see that it feels like to me we are slipping back away from our progress. Unfortunately, I am seeing signs that we're getting back to a place that looks like 2018 to me, in my opinion, if I'm being honest. And we need the support from the state to continue making progress so that we don't roll back. Fifth Avenue Bridge construction and dam removal, can't stress enough that that is something that we need to keep pushing on. The irony of all of this is that we are a state that champions climate and environment, and right in our own backyard or front yard of the legislative building is a man-made lake that is detrimental to the environment and wildlife, and the dam is detrimental to salmon. And so we should lead by our example and live our values as a state and do what we need to do to remove it, and would appreciate your support in continuing to champion that. We also have, local revenue options that we need in order to address behavioral health challenges. I didn't hear you, I may have missed it, but I didn't see too much other than just the public safety funding that you mentioned. I didn't see a whole lot in terms of responding to behavioral health challenges, and I feel like sometimes that is, sort of just conflated with homelessness, but we need your support in pushing for more revenue for behavioral health resources. That includes not just crisis response unit, that's a voluntary program, but DCRs, or designated crisis responders, to respond to incidents that are not voluntary, and we could use the state support in that effort as well. I am curious about the big beautiful bill, which is now law. And we have on our legislative agenda to create programs to address the cost of rent, food, and childcare. And going forward, I'd be interested in knowing what the state's response is going to be to this legislation. We certainly know that we could use the support as a local jurisdiction, concerns with Medicare cuts and SNAP benefits, and the governor has said that 250,000 Washingtonians are going to be affected by the Medicare reduction. So I'm curious how many of those people will be Olympians, and so we could really use your support in championing some sort of response from the state to make up for the damage that's done. All in all, I will say I think we've fared pretty well, considering where we are with the state's budget deficit. We had a conversation as a body about whether or not our agenda was too pie in the sky. Do you remember that conversation we had from the dais? And we were pretty successful this legislative session, just in terms of maybe not getting everything that we wanted, but a good portion of it we were successful at. And so I appreciate all the work that you've done to help lead that effort so that we were successful. And I look forward to another successful session. It'll be a short one and a fast one, but I hope that we can continue to make progress. So thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And of course, the thanks at the state level goes largely to Senator Bateman, Representative Dolio, and Representative Parsley for, as I brought things to them, they were a great team in making sure that your interests and those of the 22nd District and the City of Olympia were recognized. I've maybe given Representative Parsley too much excessive praise for all the work she did on a number of our things, but all three of them were integral team members, particularly Senator Bateman as the new chair of the Housing Committee as a freshman senator, really moved heaven and earth on a lot of these things. And so all three of them were really instrumental in any and all of these achievements.
Thank you, Nick. And we thank our 22nd legislative delegation as well. Thank you. Okay. All right. So that takes us to our next agenda item, which is item 6C, our federal legislative update. And we have Susan Grisham back, our legislative liaison, to introduce Rick Desimone and Liz Fortunato from the Desimone Consulting Group.
Yes, part two of our legislative doubleheader tonight is our federal overview with Rick Desimone and Liz Fortunato. As we sort of have our head on a swivel as to what's happening on the federal level, I'm really excited to have them here to give us a lay of the land a little bit. And right now I'm actually going through the bill to figure out how it affects us directly. So I've been sifting through that, and I'm going to be working with staff to figure out just what this means for us. I think we know generally, but there's a lot in here. This is a 40-page summary that I've been working through. So with that, I will invite Liz and Rick up to help us navigate some of what's going on.
Thank you, Susan.
Mayor, council members, thank you very much for allowing us to be here today and allowing us to represent you in our nation's capital. I think I'll start by saying I don't think we'll be checking anything off the federal legislative agenda today for the city of Olympia. I think, as you know, there's been a shift in government priority and perspective these first 7 months of a new majority in Congress, administration, and it's creating challenges for municipalities and local governments at a lot of different levels. We've gone from divided government last year, which has its own challenges, to unified government with Republican control of the executive branch and the two branches of Congress. And they are working through a pretty aggressive agenda every day. We see the administration pushing to expand the authority of the executive branch, and that manifests in a number of different ways. They're shifting orientation and priority of agencies. They're closing agencies. They are shedding personnel, which is having an effect of diminishing capacity even when the authorities or the policies don't change. And of course, they're effectuating great policy change as well. Most of the Congress's focus and attention thus far has been on enacting the administration's agenda that was manifest most aggressively and completely with the signing into law of the One Big Beautiful Bill, H.R. 1, on July 4th. And even though you've seen a lot of sort of puts and takes through the policy development and legislative process, the congressional majority is working pretty hand in glove with the administration to enact their agenda. The congressional minority is working to exert their influence on the process, but they have thus far they've had limited opportunities to engage in significant, sustained ways. Tonight, we're going to walk through a couple different things. We're going to talk about the fiscal year 26 appropriations process. We're going to talk about some of the highlights of H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill. As was referred to, it's a massive piece of legislation that we're going to, sort of learn about as it's implemented over time, but we have the outlines and the parameters of it available to us now. And then lastly, we'll go through the city's agenda. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Liz.
Thank you again for having us. I'm going to talk about the fiscal year 26 appropriations request that the city forwarded to our members of Congress. By way of background, there are 12 appropriations bills that go through the cycle every year in Congress. And what we did was back in, I guess, last fall and early winter, met with all of the department heads in Olympia to talk about what projects might be in the queue, what's ready, what's developed, what's been funded, what has permits, what has plans, what's available. We talked to economic development, we talked to public safety, we talked about housing and homelessness. Inevitably, we ended up with the Armory. And the reason we ended up with the Armory is because the city has put significant development into the Armory, but also because as we were looking at the budget as it was outlaid, there was actually some physical items in there that we could tangibly take under the eligibility criteria, because that is a really important part. If your project doesn't fit the eligibility criteria, it goes nowhere. And so we discovered that an elevator is actually something the federal government would fund. And so what we did is we extrapolated the elevator from the overall program and created basically a request that fulfilled application of ADA. We needed to make sure that people can get into the Armory and use the Armory. Val and I from the Parks Department worked very closely together and put together 3 applications, one each for Representative Strickland, one for Senator Murray, and one for Senator Cantwell, that talked in depth about the need for access. And that's the important part of the elevator component, but also the importance of the Armory itself to the community. We spent a lot of time in those applications talking about the access to a large facility that is really the only one in the community besides South Puget Sound Community College, access to the counseling rooms, access to the new art area, all of the access issues that are required. What is required is the elevator. We can't get anywhere without the elevator. So we put the 3 applications together. We asked for a total of $956,000. As the process goes, you submit your requests to your member of Congress. They consider them, and then if they pass their test, then they forward them on to the committee, and then hopefully the committee will accept it. So in the case of Olympia, when we forwarded it to each of the offices, in Representative Strickland's case, she has a community group that goes through and reviews all of her requests, which, remember, that's her entire district. So that's Tacoma, Pierce County, Thurston County, Lacey, and the city of Olympia was one of 15 that were forwarded to Representative Strickland, and she took it, accepted it, and forwarded it to the subcommittee as one of her 15 requests for the year, which is a big deal. And it's a big deal because the account with which we identified is one of the most overprescribed accounts, unfortunately, in Congress. But we feel like we've put together a really good application and hope that the next process, so the bill was marked up in subcommittee on Monday. It's embargoed, so we'll find out Thursday when they do the full committee markup and they do a full presentation on the public side where it lands. And so we're really, really hopeful that we're going to be in a House bill, even though, you know, it's been a tough year, but she's been a great champion, and we were really, really fortunate that we put together a great application with great letters of support. Thank you to the mayor for his letter of support. We got the Thurston County Chamber of Commerce. There's the Economic Development Council, which is really important because the grant we applied for is called the Economic Development Initiative. So having that component in there was really critical, including the Olympia Downtown Alliance. And then we had a letter from all of the anchor tenants. It is required when you apply for congressional funding that you have 2 letters of support, and we had 5. So we tried to go above and beyond on that. Unfortunately, we were not part of the Senate packages. Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell did not put the Olympia project in their list, but we're in Representative Strickland's list, so we're crossing our fingers and we're hoping on Thursday we'll find out publicly what Congress has done to take this initiative and hopefully help fund at least this portion of the Armory. Again, we needed to extrapolate something very physical for Congress to consider it. And I think that was, and then the process itself. The process itself. So we had subcommittee on Monday, and we have Thursday is full committee. The next process is that goes to the full House floor, and then on the Senate side, the same thing will happen with the same bill. So subcommittee, full committee, and when they both pass both bodies, then they meet in conference. And they meet in conference, that's where you really hope that your piece stays in. And if it stays in, then gets signed into law by the president, and that's when the funds come through. Last year was a bizarre year, and we had a continuing resolution. And so the bills from last year were all basically funded at fiscal year 25 levels, which means that all of the appropriations requests that all these members of Congress had included got wiped away. So we're hoping that this year the regular process takes shape so that all of those extra congressional requests remain intact by the end of the year, which was September 30. So that's the process, and we'll see where we go, and we hopefully will have something to report back to you on Thursday in a more public fashion.
I'll just add a little bit to the fiscal year 26 process. As Liz said, the fiscal year 25 process was anomalous in many ways. The fiscal year 25 started October 1st of 2024, and it took until March of this year for them to complete the fiscal year 25 process. And it was anomalous, and it was the first time, maybe ever, that Congress decided to do a continuing resolution to fund the federal government at prior year levels. And that was done for a variety of reasons. This year, fiscal year 26 is affected by that process and how that unfolded. Also, the administration has sent up what are called rescission packages. And so, we've all been reading about cuts to many of these agencies and the loss of personnel, the loss of functionality. And the ability of the administration to perform those functions is being tested in court. Do they have the authority to do that? Because many of those agencies, many of those programs have been enacted into law. What this rescission package does is essentially ask the Congress to validate the diminishment of funds for particular functions. And so the bill they have before them now is a $9 billion cut to NPR and foreign aid services. The reason that's relevant to the city of city of Olympia, is that depending on how that goes, it could further erode trust in the appropriations process. The appropriations process is one of the last sort of bipartisan functions of the Congress. You really need the two parties to get along to pass appropriations bills. If this rescission package passes, it will undermine that ability for the appropriators to function. The Senate was meant to take up that package today. They have until Friday to dispose of it, and it's unclear how that's going to turn out. I just say that in that the rocky road that we've been experiencing on federal budget processes will continue. So, H.R. 1, the big, beautiful bill. So the core of this bill, I'm sure as all of you know, is during the first Trump administration in 2017, the Congress enacted pretty significant tax reform. Those tax provisions were set to sunset or expire at the end of this fiscal year, so September of 2025. And so the administration and the congressional majority made it a priority to extend the life of those tax adjustments that they had enacted in 2017 further. And as part of that, they made other adjustments to the tax code. They funded some defense spending, and they funded some law enforcement, most significantly around immigration enforcement functions, and they changed, a number of different policies around, in different federal agencies. There were, I think, 11 committees of jurisdiction that had inputs on this bill. So it's a significant policy initiative. As we said, will have implications for years to come. We talk about the Farm Bill in here, and we'll talk about some of the cuts to SNAP and Medicaid on the next slide. The reason why we highlighted this is the Farm Bill is a bill that authorizes supports to farmers for production, but it also funds nutrition programs for the federal government. And again, that process to pass a Farm Bill has traditionally been a bipartisan process because folks representing rural areas that want the farm supports, typically join forces with folks who want to advance nutrition benefits and make compromises and pass a bill. What's been done in H.R. 1 is to disaggregate the farm supports from the nutrition supports. And so they've authorized the extension of the farm supports and left the nutrition supports sort of out there hanging. This bill, despite the cuts that have been made, are going to add $3.3 trillion to the federal deficit over the life of its program, and it also increases the debt limit that the federal government is able to borrow against by $5 trillion.
And Rick, before you continue, those are not numbers that your firm is saying it does. That's from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office.
That is correct.
Yes.
So the scorekeeper for the Congress that, does the official ledger for how much things cost is, as you say, Mayor, the Congressional Budget Office, and they're the ones whose analysis informed those numbers. Yes, sir. Despite the, deficit increases, there are significant cuts included in H.R. 1. Most significantly, those cuts come from Medicaid, and those come in the form of changes to provider tax provisions, which states use. Every state, I think, except Alaska and one other, use to sort of adjust and maximize the reimbursement that they receive from the federal government for Medicaid provided services, because recall, Medicaid is a joint federal-state program. There are also eligibility and work requirements that, again, CBO has determined will have the effect of pushing people off of the Medicaid eligibility rolls. Not necessarily because people on Medicaid aren't working, but the requirements of proving that work are challenging, and folks will have a hard time meeting those reporting requirements. Similarly, big cuts to SNAP. Those come on pretty fast. So states are required to develop plans for enforcing the new SNAP provisions by November 1st of this calendar year. So that is just around the corner. And there's a lot of different components to that mostly have to do with work requirements, expanding the cohorts of the population that are required to work, and narrowing sort of eligibility requirements. Additionally, there were cuts to many of the tax credit provisions that have been passed over the years, most notably in the Inflation Reduction Act, that promoted and incentivized the development of clean energy. So many of those are, the rollbacks of those are sort of staggered depending on the technology. So electric vehicles, those expire this year, but others for clean hydrogen and others are being curtailed over time. Interestingly, there were some pretty big debates about some other policies that affect municipalities. One was around selling public lands. These are federal lands. There were folks who wanted to sell federal lands as a revenue generator. That ended up getting tossed out of the final bill, primarily as a result of pushback from Western members of Congress in the majority, actually, who wanted to preserve public access to those lands. There was also a big debate about the authority of state and local jurisdictions to regulate AI. The House bill contained a moratorium on the ability of local jurisdictions and state jurisdictions to regulate AI. The Senate pretty aggressively pushed back, including Senator Cantwell from our own state, to maintain state and local jurisdictions' ability to regulate that industry. So those are, tough things, obviously, that are going to trickle through the state and local government processes for years to come. And while this wasn't a bipartisan process, there were some bipartisan wins in H.R. 1. And so, the federal agenda that you all passed earlier in the year included a priority on looking to expand child care. And this is an area that Senator Murray in our state and others have championed. And actually, the H.R. 1 made some progress on supports for childcare, expanding dependent care flexible spending accounts, permanently expanding the child and dependent care tax credit, and tripling the tax credit for for businesses that provide childcare. These are, I think, meaningful provisions because many of them haven't been expanded for a long time, but their effect will be limited because in order to receive value from them, you have to have sort of a net balance owed to the federal government. So the folks that don't pay taxes to the federal government, which is a significant percentage of our working families, will not be able to take advantage of these expanded child care enhancements. But it is, some progress against the city's agenda. I'm going to turn this back over to Liz to go through some of our other items.
Deschutes Estuary. So in that one, we play sort of a supporting role because obviously Nick is doing a lot of the work at the state legislative level, but Jay has been participating in some coordination efforts when they go back to DC, the group or the coordinated effort. We've been helping advise them, and for example, talking about the bridge, for example, there's still 2 years left in the bipartisan infrastructure law for transportation, and so I've been trying to push the idea that maybe that might be something to look at because there were increased funds for that particular account, which is a bridge building account. And so that's kind of our behind the scenes efforts there, is to try and support the Deschutes Estuary program as much as we can from the federal level, knowing what, for example, the Squaxin Island Tribe is working on, what DES is working on, and just trying to provide a backfill on that. I keep in very close touch with the congressional staff on this one, and if they have questions, they'll ping me. But I know Senator Cantwell's office has been very engaged, Senator Murray's office, all three have been totally very engaged on this one. But for now, our role is largely supportive. If something percolates and needs support on the federal level, that's where we'll come in. But we'll see about, I think there's bridge money out there. I'm kind of positive about that. Housing and homelessness, this is another one that's kind of the odd thumbs up scenario, which is that they made some changes that allow for more efforts in the low-income housing tax credit scenario where folks can take bigger and greater advantage of the tax credits there. They increase some opportunities in the low-income housing tax credit. In both of sort of the bigger programs, one that is for rehabilitating a building that needs rehabilitation or starting brand new development. There's tax increase credits in those. We talked about economic development and infrastructure, and to Rick's point, the downward pressure as everything rolls downhill, that's going to be the hard part when all of these changes occur. Excuse me. I included in here the opportunity zones and the new markets tax credit. Those are largely for low-income communities, but as we've come to learn from the Economic Development Department at Olympia, because Olympia is such a great partner, sometimes just knowing that these programs have been increased or made permanent are helpful to share with others in the community because they are permanent now. So there's more opportunity for the private sector to take advantage of those tax credits, which are pretty lengthy and pretty significant if you're in the right community. It means you got to marry the developer with the right community in order to take advantage of the tax credit, but it's for low income and smaller communities that need more low income housing. And then promoting health and safety and protecting rights. We've all read all the headlines in the news ourselves. I mean, we continue to monitor those issues, but there's change afoot every day in Congress on these issues and from the administration, and so we continue to monitor them. One thing we do monitor and keep close contact with Susan on is on sanctuary city issues. At one point, Olympia was on a list, and then the list disappeared. We don't know where the list went, but there was definitely a list, and so far we haven't. Yeah, there was a list. It went away, oddly enough. But anyway, we do keep very in touch with Susan and anything that happens on sanctuary city issues. Largely what it's been is mostly coming out of the administration and creating lists. And for now, we haven't really seen a whole lot of other, effort in that regard other than just list creating and then lists disappearing. So that's kind of our update on that one. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Any questions from council? And Councilmember Cooper.
I'm going to ask a hard one. Thank you both so much for advocating for us in a dysfunctional body. I spend a lot of time in policy work in my day job, and so I'm frustrated in every angle of my life, as you are. And one of the things that I've been wondering is, in a world of where lives rule the day and the advocacy of a civil society doesn't work, how do we reinvent? Are you seeing any signs of anybody doing it different? And not to like, this isn't about you, but I think it's about your industry being on the cutting edge of how to do policy, right? And is there new ways, or are there ways that you're seeing that are working in this environment that even our community should be thinking of? Like how do we cut through the noise in a way that's meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a good question. Look, you know, there are a lot of challenges and disappointments coming out of Washington, D.C. today. But, you know, there is an agenda that, you know, isn't always front page. And there are still people at the agencies performing their functions in accordance with their authorities and the law. You know, I think that, you know, one of the things that we've talked to, you know, folks about, and I, you know, counsel folks on that I think is effective is, you know, the administration and the Congress, they've identified, you know, certain strategic industries and initiatives that they think are important. They want the U.S. to be dominant in AI. They want the U.S. to be dominant in energy. They have particular feelings about which types of energy. They want, you know, certain industries to be, you know, life sciences to be something that the U.S. is resilient in. I think that there's opportunity to be a partner on those things where we might find agreement on wanting to do economic development that supports these strategic industries that allows cities like Olympia to make progress. To Liz's point, you know, there's still a large body of law like the you know, bipartisan infrastructure bill that's still authorized and funded that will provide opportunity to advance the city's agenda. So I think, you know, my counsel would be to pick your battles and pick your opportunities because there's going to be some of each. And just to, you know, follow up on the sanctuary city issue, ICE's budget, I think this fiscal year is about $8 billion. The HR 1 gives them a pretty significant infusion of like $28 billion. They're now the most, you know, well-resourced law enforcement agency in the federal government. You know, we're seeing what's happening with enforcement in Los Angeles, and that is in the process of being tested in the courts right now. So there's an appeal on the tactics that and the justifications that the administration is using. I think as that gets you know, sorted out and those authorities get better defined, you'll see those new resources applied in similar ways around the country. That's not a direct answer to your question, but I think that's you know, something for us to think about sort of going forward as well.
Yeah, thank you. I knew it was an impossible question, but I think that you're right on. Like, we have to stay civil, right? As long as we possibly can, to try to find where those alignments are. And we know that we have good allies. So thanks
We
for
have
your
great allies in our members of Congress who represent us, and they're fighting for us every day. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilman.
No, I'm challenged by the notion of staying civil and that our delegation is fighting for us every day. I understand, you're doing your job as we and many other organizations have asked you to do the job, but the incremental shifts and wins there are supposing that we have rational actors in a functioning democracy. And from where I'm sitting, the sort of wholesale demolition of functions within agencies and the willingness to suspend longstanding regulations, it feels a little bit to me like getting a report from the 1936 Spanish Parliament saying we've made incremental changes this year, but we're also, gutting agencies, terminating employees, dismantling the social safety net, and the rule of law is being disregarded as the courts crumble. And so I'm just really challenged with, I appreciate the call for politeness or civility, but I think it has to be reciprocal. And if there's respect and kindness on one side and cruelty on the other side, we're going to come in second place every time. So it's no disrespect on your work, and I know it's exactly what we ask you to do, is to keep working with those congressional staffers and trying to get us another % of REIT or whatever it is, right? But I also want us to think about the Pacific Coast Collaborative, the bioregion sort of notion, that we are 55 million people with a gross domestic product of $3 trillion if you put the West Coast together. And that's like the third largest economy on the planet. And to be whipsawed like this, I just think is not tenable. So I just had to windmill a little bit because I appreciate all the cautious deliberation, but I'm also wanting to politely insist, I guess, that the rule of law is followed. So.
I don't mean to minimize the challenges, and we are your advocates. So you direct us and we will go advocate.
Thank you. Kind of couldn't agree more on that. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you're making little of something. You're professionals. You're showing up as just that. You probably have a lot of frustrations that you're not sharing with us. And as professionals, you're not supposed to come on a lectern and start venting. So I so appreciate both of your work, and I don't really have any questions or comments to share. I just want Councilmember Gilman to know that you are so not alone. In a big way. It all sort of feels really numbing. Yeah. I just feel like we just have to hold on to everything that we currently have. And it's tough when we know that what we currently have could even be improved. Yeah.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you both. I really appreciate all of the advocacy, despite the fact that, I'll just go ahead and say it, this legislative agenda is pie in the sky to some extent, given the makeup of the current Congress. I appreciate you advocating anyway on our behalf. So thank you, first and foremost. For my council mates, I think, as we talk about, the next year federal agenda, I think we should have a conversation about some of these items that will continue to be on the agenda. I feel like there's quite a few here that we should keep. I noticed that we have protecting rights on the back. I know we talk about symbolism and what that means, but that should be number one, in my opinion, and then everything else follows. But we should really think about keeping those things that are necessary to keep, and where do we need to make some additions based on relevance and given where we are. So things like Medicaid reductions, things like that, we might want to think about. Not any questions for you. Just mostly, you know, I'm going to jump on this train of venting for a moment here, is that this is on brand for electing a 34-time felon as President of the United States. It's not a shock that we have difficulty accomplishing things that are very important to our community. These are real people who live here, and we have real challenges and issues to address, and we're being blocked. We're being stonewalled for silly partisan reasons that unfortunately we all will pay the price for until we have an opportunity to change it. And I hope that you'll be along with us for that journey of continue to advocate on the city's behalf, some of which these policies are kitchen table things that affect people right in their homes. And so we need to have a conversation about how we continue to lift that up and represent the people who elected us to do just that. And you're a part of that by extension, so thank you.
Well, we thank you for the opportunity to work with you and for you and to advance the city's values and goals. So we appreciate that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. That takes us to our final business item on our agenda for tonight, which is item 6D, the State of Lot's Clean Water Alliance briefing, Lot being Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County. And we have Matt Kennelly, who is the Executive Director of Lot Clean Water Alliance, presenting to us tonight. Hi, Matt.
Hi. Thank you for having me again. Just prepared some overall updates on how we're doing at Lot. And it's something I like to do every year to give you an update on what we've been up to. So I thought I'd start out just generally how we function as your wastewater utility, and then get into our performance over the last year, our community connections, and how we're planning for the future, making sure that as you all continue to make economic decisions and how the city grows, that Lot's there to accommodate that growth. So as a reminder, as Mayor Payne said, LOT stands for Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. We are a regional wastewater utility, formed actually in 1976 as an entity, and at the time in 1976, that entity paid the city of Olympia to run treatment services. That changed right around about 2000 through 2005, and now LOT is what you see today. We have a board of directors, so one elected official from each of those partner jurisdictions. You recognize our board member, Madrone, here. And our mission is to protect public health and the environment by cleaning water and restoring resources for our community. We have about 140,000 people in the service area, just about 65,000 connections or so. The ratepayers are served through the city, so you all decide with the staff, decide on where those sewer collection pipes go, where homes are connected, where growth occurs, and then you maintain that collection piping. When those collection pipes combine with another city, that's usually where we take over and maintain those pipes. Some of the customers that we have are actually in the urban growth areas. So Thurston County, by nature, is involved from a variety of perspectives, but also as the city grows into the county, some of those ratepayers end up getting annexed into the city. How we do that treatment is primarily at our downtown Butt Inlet treatment plant. We treat about 13 million gallons per day. You might remember the analogy I used before, but I like to use it. So a 4-story building, I think we're about 4 stories here. If you take this 4-story building and expand it on the entire football field, that volume, if you fill that entire building up with wastewater, sewage, that's what we do every day. So that's what we take, is that broken product, that broken wastewater, water, and make it clean for you and the environment. That's our job. We're proud to say that we have the highest level of treatment on Puget Sound. We're very highly regulated. We just did a major process upgrade recently that we're very proud of. And then we have a variety of other infrastructure, pump stations and piping and all sorts of things. All told, it's about $1 billion of infrastructure that we're in charge of maintaining. As I mentioned, we're very highly regulated. So the Clean Water Act and EPA, it all flows down to the Department of Ecology. And then we have all these discharge limits and monitoring requirements, all sorts of things. It's about 15,000 samples that we take every year in order to comply with our permit and show that we're doing the high level of treatment that we're regulated to do. We also have requirements from the US EPA. It's called CMOM, the acronym spelled out here. But basically, they require us to show that we are adequately funding and maintaining and building capacity as the communities grow. So I'll show you how we did in our performance here in 2024. We have this annual report that we produced, and I brought copies with me if you care for it. But basically, it's a brief document that shows how we did this last year. But if you flip on the back, it's kind of just some fun numbers. I mentioned all of that wastewater flow. So 4.46 billion gallons of wastewater. I don't have a great analogy for that, but that's a big number. 91 staff members, thousands of samples, all sorts of things. We continue to have zero discharge of pollutants. So things like nitrogen and how we affect oxygen into our receiving waters. We continue to meet that goal 100% in 2024. These are awards that we submit for. These are the 2023 ones. It takes a little bit for them to issue the 2024 ones, so I don't have updated images there, but we do have the same performance records in 24. So as I mentioned before, we have the highest level of treatment on Puget Sound. So there's 57 other treatment plants also doing similar treatment, not to the high level that we are, but there's a variety of people that are discharging into Puget Sound from their communities, variety of entities. And the chart on the right is what we run every year, saying how do our rates compare across the region? And proud to share also, you can see the city of Olympia here is below average. So you take the lot charge and the city's charge, combine them, and that creates that rate that you see. So what this shows is the highest level of treatment on Puget Sound for below average rates. That represents good value to the community. We have some major project awards, and when you win 4 awards and you have 4 board members, it's nice, it's fun to get up and take a picture like this. This was a project that when we upgraded our treatment plant, and variety of just nice project awards. That last one, that grand award, was won in Washington, D.C., where we were one of the top 8 designs in the entire country. I mean, these are projects that are like New York, massive transit infrastructure projects. And so it was really nice to be able to win an award for a design like that. We reuse resources. That's part of our mission. So we reuse biogas. We create heat and power and provide that to the Hands-On Children's Museum and heat our own building and processes. We also produce biosolids. That's a solid material that comes off the process. So instead of anhydrous ammonia, the farmer-led program in Eastern Washington uses biosolids that has nitrogen, phosphorus, moisture. You can see the difference. Biosolids is on the right and the anhydrous ammonia is on the left when they ran some tests. Reusing water, when we have all of that flow coming down to us and we clean it up to a standard that can be used on irrigation, it's reused in City of Olympia irrigation, the state. The City of Tumwater uses 600,000 gallons per day of reuse water on their golf course. So that's a drop-for-drop offset, but you don't have to use drinking water supplies and use groundwater. And when we build infrastructure, we always try to look to find a community connection to it. So 600,000 gallons per day is a lot of instantaneous volume in one day. So we built a storage tank in the side of the hill overlooking the Deschutes Valley, and then the city of Tumwater came in and put a park on top of it as a collaborative project between us. Or down in front of the Hands on Children Museum, we have that wading stream for reclaimed water, so a public access space. Or out at our Hawks Prairie infiltration ponds, that's a public park that the community can come to, and Audubon Society use. It's really grown up nicely, especially with the warehouses that have come in over time. It's a nice little oasis for people. And so when we built our administrative building, about 14 years ago, our board had the foresight at the time to say, let's put a wet science center in there. Let's actually educate the public with this. It's been very successful over the years and only grown. About 12,000 visitors we saw last year. We also try to remove barriers for school districts that come because we integrate with the school curriculum with our educators. So we help fund substitute teachers or busing when they have shortfalls to be able to get access for all the school districts equally. So Olympia School District, all of the Olympia district's 6th grade classes come through our program, so we integrate with the curriculum there. They get green building tours, and we're looking in the future to expand this into high schools as well. When it relates to the community, our focus is holistic. So this is a pie chart from Department of Ecology, which shows the impact to oxygen in Butt Inlet, so the oxygen depletion in Butt Inlet. So you can see that little red slice there, that's Butt Inlet Treatment Plant. And I'm not showing that because that's where the small pipes, I'm actually showing we need to continue to do the highest level of treatment we can do at lot, but focusing on the larger picture is important for overall water quality. So as you mentioned before here tonight, Deschutes Estuary, that's why LOT's involved from a business case into supporting Capitol Lake converting to an estuary, because we want to focus on that for water quality, and as a community, the investments of ratepayers in a smaller amount to support the estuary versus $100 million, for example, to expand a small portion of the treatment plant. It's also why we're involved in supporting the permitting, additional permitting for those other treatment plants to do more, similar to what we do. And also septic to sewer conversions, hygiene trailers, all of those type of things all relate to the larger picture. And that type of thinking and approach has allowed us to build on our relationship with the Squaxin Island Tribe and signed an accord in December of last year, because we're sitting on the same side of the table, actually with ecology, all focused on water quality. And to be direct, the city's work with the Squaxin Island Tribe actually inspired me personally to think this way. It was building, before my involvement in this role, but also just thinking, hey, can we go ahead and sign an accord together to recognize the work that we're doing in things like the Deschutes Estuary and other things. So I'm really excited for this long-term agreement, as well as just getting recognized overall for that bigger picture thinking through a national award. That gets picked up by the news, and that shows the community that we are thinking bigger. So we provide a 50% discount for homes connecting from septic tanks to sewers. We also provide a 50% discount for connection fees for affordable housing, and that original request came from the city of Olympia about, can LOT do anything to help? And there is a clear nexus to water quality, and so we evaluate it, and we're running a pilot program, and we've been able to extend that. And the last thing I'll mention on community programs is climate. So as a region, we're working on climate together, so we ask ourselves, what can LOT do to support the regional climate work? And we are the largest power user in Thurston County, as I understand, about $100,000 a month just at our downtown plant that we pay, looking at numbers I just looked at from last year. So getting that footprint down is also good for business, but we've been making some really clear upgrades to be able to use less power, to think differently, use new technology, and you can see some of these numbers. So a 30% decrease overall, but remember, since 2015, more and more people are moving to town. So I like to show the per capita number, because 42% decrease per capita over that time is a significant chunk. Now, certainly the grid has gone greener over time, so that helps too, but we really made some major strides together with staff. So I'll also leave you with how we're planning for the future. As I mentioned, I want you to know that LOT is thinking forward and making sure that the decisions that each of our partner jurisdictions are making are going to be accommodated. So we do annual planning. We do a lot of detailed planning. We're monitoring how much flow is out in the system, how much nitrogen comes in. We're monitoring how much rainwater comes into the open sewers. And then we look at capacity over all of our treatment processes. We combine that with the work that we do managing all of our assets, is what we call them. So 5,000 different assets, pumps, and those type of things, and what needs to be upgraded. And that goes into our capital plan. And where we do with our capital plan and where we need to keep at is the capital projects. So this is a project, our digester project. You can see the scale of the size of just one. That's one of 4 digesters that we have. That's a thing that basically produces that biogas and the biosolids, and it's a necessary part of the treatment process. And you see the big crane over in downtown and in our section. That's to support this project. About 75% of our budget overall goes to capital projects and the debt service for them. So Franklin Street is closed down for about 3 years, a portion of it. We have an RV dump station. I believe you all have talked about access for that. During the summer, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, it's open. The contractor actually takes everything down and gets out of the way, and then we can go ahead and have RVs access that station. And then also we need to think about the future. We need to test out new technologies. So rather than just say, yeah, this technology looks good, let's implement it full scale, we actually have a pilot team where we test new things. If some things, don't work, and that's okay, rather than invest millions of dollars in a full-scale implementation. In other ways, a new pump system works, and then we scale it up and install it overall in many different parts of our plant. So that's our pilot team that we run. We're forward-thinking. We think about that. But what our pilot team is working on next relates to water reuse, because water reuse is great for irrigation and it works well. But where we've seen over time is it makes economic sense for things like golf courses and large users, because the infrastructure that it takes to get purple pipe out to those type of things is worthwhile. Piping up everybody's home in the city of Olympia, you can imagine how much so you're basically running 2 water systems. And just in a sense, we've treated water to this really high level. And so what we're doing next, thinking about, well, what the future may bring for decades into the future, is thinking about, we're going to demonstrate that you can take it all the way to drinkable water. And this is just a point in time. This is not connecting to any pipes. This is at our plant. Just go ahead and demonstrate that it can be done, because the technology has existed for a long time, things like reverse osmosis. But we believe, as the treatment experts and being forward-thinking, that our community eventually, like many communities, California, Florida, Texas, they've had to go to these type of systems. And so if this could unlock in future decades public acceptance of, let's just say, the city of Olympia wanted to take this on in the decades to come, we've demonstrated it can be done, and we grow from there. And so this would be the first in Washington state to do this. It's been done in other states, but in Washington it hasn't been done before. And so we think about lots of future capacity even, and as we continue to want to find more uses for reuse water, this is a way to help with that journey. A big coalition for this, SPSCC, Brewing and Distilling has signed on, so it'll be, once you make water, a lot of states that do this is you have fun, you have a party, you brew beer, you kind of have a fun event with it just to demonstrate it. We're looking at non-alcoholic, things as well. So much more to come. This is off in 2026, probably as a launch, and much more to come. But I just want to give you a preview that we're thinking towards the future. The goal is to demonstrate that water should be judged by its quality and not its history, because once you start thinking that way, it really can unlock a lot of possibilities. We have a plan for 2050. That's how we're looking out that far as well with our planning. we don't need to build new treatment plants all around the community. And that was kind of the early 2000s mindset. It was a good plan, but we've been able to do this major upgrade and really treat water to a high enough level that all through 2050 we can accommodate growth in the community by really doubling down on our main treatment plant. So from an environmental footprint, from a cost setup, it's really the right way to go. So we have plans for that, and we can continue to adapt them as time goes forward. But we're selling some properties that were purchased in the early 2000s that we don't need to build treatment plants anymore. And we first offer those to the partner jurisdictions. So Lacey ended up purchasing a property from us for affordable housing, for example. We're talking to Tumwater now about our property in the Brewery Valley for them to be able to purchase that and use that to the best city use and best public use from there. And I can't forget the people that make it work. I found some fun photos, the dirty jobs kind of thing. These are the folks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You all don't need to worry about this. We're taking care of it. And it's the dirty jobs, but it's the clean jobs, and it's maintenance, it's construction, it's testing, it's engineering, it's all sorts of things. We have about 91 people that work really hard to get it done. And a lot of great coordination with city staff as well. Just a really strong relationship that we have. And, you know, we have something called the Lot Way, and that's what really, I believe, kind of sets us apart from our culture. We have a very low turnover rate, just have a lot of fun, but very highly technical workforce that are committed to the mission. So I'll end in just showing, you know, here in 2025, and we look out to 2050, what's going to get us there is that core value of dedicated to the mission. Our role is to treat wastewater, kind of thinking bigger, thinking what's next, being innovative, adapting to the future, and doing a lot of planning to make that happen. But ultimately, it's that public trust that's gonna take us all the way to 2050. That's what we're counting on. So hopefully that was informative about what we're up to, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Matt. Questions from the dais. Councilmember Madrone.
I do have a question for you. But first, Matt kind of breezed through at the end about workplace culture. And I just want to say a little bit more about that, just having been on the lot board for just a little bit now. You know, I've seen firsthand that they've really cultivated a really, really great place for people to work at Lot. You know, they really are focused on people being happy and healthy and being a part of the community, so much so that they stole Jesse Barnum from us, but at least I still get to work with him. But there's just a lot of deliberate work being done to make sure that Lot, you know, is just a stellar place where people can thrive in their work. So I just wanted to name that. My question for you, Matt, what did we name the crane?
Fraser Crane. That was
Okay,
the
thank you.
public process that named the crane. Thank you for that. Yeah, Fraser. Yes.
Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Thanks, Matt. You're so patient. As item 6D, I always appreciate these briefings about the state of Lot each year that we get from you. I have a couple questions. You were talking just recently about selling off some of those properties. You don't need them anymore. So what do you intend to do with those funds?
So those funds go into looking at they're basically repurposing it. So that map that I showed before, we bought some property from the port right nearby, and we're looking to purchase additional property. So property downtown can be expensive, especially right where it is. So basically, it's reappropriating those funds for the investments in the main treatment plant, as well as purchasing some additional property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And another question is, so I know your main mission, of course, is to clean the water. I'm always really, I don't know, it just makes me smile, the Wet Science Center. I really like the Wet Science Center. And whenever I need new scrapers, I just go there and get the little police your grease lids.
Yeah.
And so and I also know that Lot does a lot of, other than the Wet Science Center, you do a lot of tours for people too. Can you talk a little bit about the Education Center? And I'm sorry if I missed it, but I don't think that there was something about with the Wet Science Center. And I just think it's such a cool place in our community. And I'd love to know kind of like how it's doing.
Sure. Yeah, so we saw about 12,000 visitors last year at the Wet Science Center and about 3,000 students. It's grown over, the success of the program, I believe, is because we have educators on staff. It's not just a passive kind of water museum. You go in and you calculate how much water you use in a day. That's nice for families that come in, especially the cross traffic with the Children's Museum right next door. But really the educators reach out to the school districts and dial into what their curriculum is and then connect to that. And so the teachers now know that it's building on that curriculum, that it augments whatever they're learning. That's to me, that's kind of the secret sauce to really make it work, and why every school district continues to come back. Even as they're having to cut programs for funding, right? They're seeing this as value. And that also helps trying to make sure that we can bust the kids, that, you know, that there's no barriers to that. So it's a program that will continue to be sustained, but the messaging also continue to change, right? As well as kind of thinking about the bigger picture and One Water and some of the messages that I shared tonight. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Councilmember Green, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
Hey, Matt.
Hi.
Thank you for that. Really some awesome information there. And I especially love the pilot team that you have and some of that research. And that just struck a question with me is, so the biogas work that you did with the Hands-On Children's Museum to help heat, all that kind of stuff, have there been any outcomes from that? Is that something that's ever scalable? Is that something that only works with a building that's right next door to you? How's that going?
Yeah, so those kind of systems can be scaled up, but we use all of our biogas, and that sometimes can be kind of a misconception, like what's Lot doing with all this methane? We actually use all of it, except for maybe in the really like the heat of the summer like this, where you just, you're producing a lot and you don't need to heat as much. But for the most time of the year, we use all of our biogas. There's when it's very cold, we need to supplement with natural gas. We try to minimize that as much as possible. That's that carbon footprint look. So to answer your question, it does usually make sense internationally when there's a treatment plant and you can use something right next door to it, because the industrial facilities like boilers and everything can be at the plant, and then you're just providing that heat. Ultimately, if there would be some kind of heat loop developed, that would be something to consider. But there's not a whole lot of heat left. As more people move to the community and you have more wastewater and you expand the plant, your gas footprint gets bigger. So you can kind of look at it together in growth. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I have another science question for you.
Okay.
So all of my friends who are the ones who like hold the water pitcher under their shower to water their plants while they're waiting for it to heat up, the extra conservative folks in Olympia, extra water conservation folks in Olympia that we have so many of, and a lot, I don't even know if many of our council members know this, that because it's been a minute since we talked about it, but we did so good at water conservation in the city of Olympia that we had to raise our rates to accommodate for the lack of sales, and it's significant. But so those folks in my life now are trying to limit microplastics into their body. What is clean water in your world compared to this microplastics conversation? Can you give us like a 101?
Well, if I understand your question right, you're saying kind of where does maybe like the shift from the water conservation world to new things we're aware of in so pharmaceuticals, microplastics, things like that.
And in particular, for helping me reframe that, like in particular, like is our science far enough along to know that what we're getting or not getting out of the treated water, if we were to drink it, is free of those things?
Yeah. So To answer that question, our science is far enough along to know whether or not it's safe to drink. But I will say that science keeps changing. And it's things like, everybody was aware of BPA at one point, and now we're more aware of things. The level of detection, we went from parts per million to parts per billion, now we're into parts per trillion. We're so small that the science is sometimes struggling to keep up. Like, okay, now we're aware of it. Does it hurt us? Sucralose is a great example. So it's an artificial sweetener that is made to really not break down in your body after it tastes sweet. And so it comes out into our world, and it's detected all over the place in wastewater and creeks and everything. And so does that hurt us or not? Because at what concentration? So there's so much out there that the science is struggling to keep up. And often we get in the wastewater business asked, what about this? What about that? And so we track things, we test things, what's regulated and beyond. We're trying to keep up with this changing science world. But to your point, it's exactly that. We've done a great job at water conservation, and I think as a community, we can do more to look to stop these products from, at the start. So microplastics and other things, source control should be the focus, and is less costly overall as a community than spending a lot of money doing treatment on the back end.
That's just like your analogy for drinking the water, right? Like you're doing the cheaper version, right, than treating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I really appreciate that. In fact, yeah, I thank you for that. I think I was thinking as you were talking, the first time I ever saw reclaimed water was the Renton treatment plant, or Black River, or it's called, or something like that. White River?
Brightwater?
Brightwater. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it used to be called, anyway.
Yeah.
But with the goal of getting to drinkability, and even 25 years, 30 years ago, it was clear that the science, we could drink it.
Right.
And so sign us up. Like, however we can be a part of that conversation,
Yeah.
I think that's where the real conservation happens, is we respect that it's still water and keep using it.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Councilmember Gilman.
I was going to try to hold back this year. So I've asked a similar question before, but Councilmember Cooper teed this up so perfectly that I understand that the plant has capacity to run this volume of water through it. You've said that's not an issue, or either for the physical structure or energy, that our water conservation is adequate there. But I do think that there's an issue of taking some large percentage of that 13 million gallons a year is artesian spring water that's pre-industrial water that hasn't been exposed to any of this, and to equate safe to drink with this precious resource of water that's not been tainted by all of the things that we're putting into our world and ourselves. I think there's still a good reason to be not just reducing water use, like watering your plants with, although that's a great idea if you start your shower with a pitcher in the morning. I'm picturing that actually, Jim. Yeah. But I do think that is a good reason to continue to think about how we run less clean water. Because you must have some sense of how much of that 13 million is clean tap water that's used to carry along some much smaller percentage of actual debris and waste.
Yes. The majority of wastewater is directly from that. It's from clean water. Water is just a carrier of all those things. 99% of it is water. In fact, when we look at wastewater generation, everybody doesn't have wastewater meters on their house. We look at how much water they use, because the majority of it goes down the drain. Very little actually you drink. Most of it goes down the drain. Some of it goes on irrigation, so we actually look in the winter time to see how much is used, and we basically say that's how much wastewater is coming. So you're exactly right. It starts from the clean water. Yeah.
Great. And thank you for this exciting report. Under your leadership, lots continuing to get more and more exciting, and It's just one of the things I've been proud of since I was a teenager about our town. We're like, hey, we're one of the first to have tertiary treatment on Puget Sound, you know, and it continues on. I'm really proud.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, so one of the questions I have about is the expansions of lot into the future, and I'm very curious if you have a second to give a little bit of a glimpse into how will we be preparing those new facilities for sea rise and around there, because there's a lot of those new plots that are going to be built up around the facility in the future.
Right. So working collaboratively with the City of Olympia and the port on sea level rise efforts, we've identified, elevations that our new infrastructure needs to be put at. So for example, we built some electrical infrastructure, and if you come to the plant, you'll see it's up on a pedestal pretty high, right? We want to build new infrastructure and verify that it's above those critical elevations. And rather just thinking about how to armor, the plant right around it, working collaboratively with the port and the city about how the entire area could benefit from working together. So that's really, we're thinking about that, more at the perimeter of the area that we are downtown, not just around the treatment plant. But we do have those models. We do have, near-term and long-term items with regard to that. So it's about placing facilities and installing the right ones. With regard to expansion, what plant expansion would look like is getting more efficiency out of the existing processes first. So we've been able to make some dramatic efficiencies, and we have other plans to do that without expanding the footprint. Should we need to expand the footprint, which might be out in the 2040s and maybe even push beyond, then we do have some of that land that I mentioned before that we look to purchase kind of here to the west. You can see these circles at the bottom of the picture. We might have to build more of those. They're called clarifiers, maybe because of just the way the process works. But most of the other things can be retrofit inside existing infrastructure. So by taking advantage of new technology, they actually make it smaller. For example, filtration you can do at a much smaller scale now. We can combine that. So we're kind of looking at land of like just in case, but the reality is we can get efficiency out of what we have by implementing new technology.
Okay, any additional questions? Thanks, Matt. I'm curious about, are you able to see things like, I know we're not supposed to, for example, dispense our medications down the toilet or using flushable wipes. Do you have an understanding of the state of improper disposal in the community or in the region? Are you able to detect that? Is there a need for more education? I know that there has been some of that, but I'm just curious about that.
Definitely a need for more education, and that could always benefit. Certainly not to flush medications, and dispose of them properly in the solid waste stream through your garbage. As far as the state of chemicals, what I would say there is we did a $10 million study, $6 million study over 10 years, the reclaimed water infiltration study. So we wanted to make sure that the reclaimed water we were producing was safe for the environment and for people. And so looking at over 100 years of use, looking at where, for example, at our Hawks Prairie infiltration area, that was where the primary part of the study is saying, okay, for 100 years, if we keep doing what we're doing, is that going to harm anybody or the environment? And the conclusions was that it was safe. So we do have all of that data. But as Councilmember Cooper said, the science is constantly changing too. So at that point in time, when we looked at that, we committed to continuing to revisit that study. It's a big lift to do a study like that, but we do have plans to continue to stay at it.
Thank you. For those listening, that is not an endorsement to keep doing what you're doing. I'm just, it's coming back to me now that you mentioned that. I believe you mentioned that last year when you presented on reclaimed water. I'm also curious about the 12,000 visits that you mentioned to the Wet Science Center. So, you know, Hands On was just here, and they mentioned having over 300,000 visits a year.
Yeah.
So, what does partnership look like between the two of you, or could there be more, or you know, can you do you have the capacity for having more visits? What's that relationship look like?
So we are having conversations really at all levels between our organizations. So I talk to Patty Belmonte frequently. Our communications and outreach director talks to probably the equivalent of what would be a COO over at the Children's Museum. And then our education people talk to each other. So I believe there's more we can do. Right now, we're relying on that cross traffic. We're keeping our stream open in the summer as late as possible, you know, till 8 p.m., right? Most of our staff leaves around 4, but we commit to keeping that open to support everything that's happening in both of our areas. So there's a lot more to be done, but I do believe that we are coordinated very well and are trying to capitalize on all of that. And certainly as the Children's Museum looks to expand, we're having detailed conversations about what that looks like and what does that mean for the future of our Wet Science Center as well. Yeah.
Great, yeah. I just see that there's tremendous opportunity to tap into that, those number of visitors that the Hands On Museum is getting, and have them, it's just a short walk across the
Right.
street.
It's right there. Yeah, for sure.
So, well, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Well, that concludes our business items for tonight. We will move on to council reports, and I do not have a report, so I will start to my right with Councilmember Madrone.
Just quickly, Thurston Regional Planning Council met last Friday. Not only did we approve don't clap yet, you don't know what I'm going to say next. We approved a position description for the executive director. You can clap for that, that's fine, that's good work. We also approved the regional transportation plan without Log Cabin Road extension in it. There is language in there that says that we will be doing that connectivity study, which we were always going to be doing, that connectivity study will include alternatives, including Log Cabin Road extension, including multimodal transportation, which we would have done anyway, but it's explicitly stated in there. But ultimately, what we desired as a council did prevail unanimously. So good news coming out of TRPC.
Thanks. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Madrone? All right. Councilmember Vanderpool.
Nothing to report. See you on Thursday.
Councilmember Gilman.
No report this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
No reports.
Councilmember Green.
No reports.
Councilmember Cooper.
You have like 40 things. I just want to say thank you to the council for tolerating another absence from me last week because I dealt with a minor health issue, but I'm back up and running and here again. So I really appreciate you all.
Thanks, and glad everything went well. Yeah. Assistant City Manager Debbie Sullivan.
Nothing to report.
All right. Well, with no further business before the Olympia City Council, we're adjourned.